Hello everyone and welcome back to AustinPlus, where today we've got another what if video. We've got a few what if videos coming this month, but today we are talking about more specifically Spider-Man and Tony Stark. Now, the reason I bring this up is obviously the Spider-Man Brand New Day film is just upon us and it is right around the corner. And this is a question that is more of a what if, but also sort of it could have happened. Because Tony Stark completely changed Peter Parker's life. He recruited him into the Avengers, gave him advanced technology, introduced him to the wider MCU, and ultimately shaped the hero Spider-Man would actually become. But what if none of that actually ever happened? What if Tony Stark never knocked on Peter's apartment door? Would Spider-Man have become a better hero, or never reached his full potential? So today we are answering the question, what if Spider-Man never met Tony Stark in the MCU? So would we have like a different version of him? So without further ado, let's get into it. Now this alternate reality, I think, is a different timeline. It's not the main one. It's this alternate timeline would have to begin shortly before Captain America Civil War. Instead of recruiting Peter Parker to fight Team Cap, Tony Stark either never discovers him or decides to not involve a 15-year-old in an Avengers conflict. Peter continues operating as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, like we saw in the show, but he would go unnoticed by the world's greatest heroes. This single decision would dramatically change both Peter's future and several MCU events. Yes, Tony Stark did do a lot for him, but they also showed the darker side, the he can do it on his by himself side, and they're kind of doing that with Brand New Day now. That's why I think that he could be this could be a variant of Spider-Man that we see. That would be quite cool. I think it would relate closely to Ben Reilly, not Spider Noir Ben Reilly. I mean, Scarlet Spider, but more grounded, more firm. Which leads me to my next point. Without Stark Industries funding his suits, his AI and his gadgets, Peter would completely rely on homemade equipment and his own intelligence. His early years would focus almost entirely on protecting New York rather than fighting the international threats or extraterrestrial threats. This version of Spider-Man would resemble the more comic book hero more closely, a very grounded Spider-Man. That's the kind of Spider-Man we see in the Spider-Man animated show, which is fair enough. I mean, that's what a lot of people grew up on. And obviously the Spider-Man in the MCU is very different, but we all love him. But going back to the old stuff wouldn't be bad either. So here is where some things get a bit wishy-washy, because you wouldn't have the typical Peter Parker suits, because no Stark suit means no instant recognition, because Tony's mentorship accelerated Peter's rise into the superhero world. Without it, Peter likely remains unknown outside of Queens. He never gains access to advanced suits, Edith, or Avengers level resources. And while his growth is slower, it also may be healthier, allowing him to develop confidence through experience rather than relying on Stark's approval. I also think would be cool character development. Now, in this film, we will not have Edith. We will not have the Avengers level resources, because no one remembers Peter Parker and they don't remember Spider-Man. I don't know how that would work, because the Avengers, they're gonna know that Spider-Man still is a thing. And they know Spider-Man is an Avenger, but they're not going to know who they really are. So that might be a bit of a different, but I know the Avengers are a bit split right now in the MCU, so that might be a bit easier to handle. But this also means the two Avengers films, or one Captain America film, would have been very different. Both of them would have been. Civil War and Infinity War would not be the same. I think Peter's absence from the airport battle has very little impact on the outcome of Civil War, because obviously it was just against Bucky and Falcon. But later events become far more significant without joining the Avengers. That also means Peter is never on the Q ship during Infinity War and just remains on Earth. But this does mean that Iron Man loses one of his closest allies during the fights against Thanos, while Peter avoids being dusted into space. But the other thing is, he wouldn't have had anyone to protect himself after, with Doctor Strange, Peter Parker was a level-headed one. So Tony Stark and Peter Parker have a lot to lose in their relationship and their friendship and mentorship, whatever. But they genuinely would miss a lot from each other. They do, as much as in the earlier movies, Tony Stark can seem to be very neglective of Peter Parker, but it's all to cloak how much he actually appreciates this kid. Now, here is where things get a bit sticky. Obviously, spiderweb, sticky. In Endgame, Tony Stark sacrificed himself. Peter became one of Tony Stark's greatest emotional motivations after Homecoming in Infinity War. Without their father-son relationship, Tony's emotional journey changes considerably. While Tony may still ultimately sacrifice himself to stop Thanos, the personal weight of that decision and Peter's devastating reaction after would probably never exist. I think the MCU would lose one of its strongest emotional storylines ever. But I also think that's why this movie is going to work very, very well. Now, here's where I think this is actually a good thing. There's only one point where I think it's a good thing, and it's if Spider-Man's villains become more personal. Without Stark Industries becoming the central to Peter Parker's life, villains like Vulture and Mysterio likely would never emerge in the same way. Adrian Toomes' conflict with Stark remains, but Peter may never become personally involved. Also, Quentin Beck has no reason to manipulate Parker for Edith, basically just eliminating the whole Far From Home movie entirely. Instead, Peter's enemies would likely consist of more traditional Spider-Man villains rooted in New York rather than Avengers-related conflicts. Now, this is where I think Scorpion comes in, Tombstone, and Tarantula and Boomerang come in perfectly for this grounded Spider-Man film we're getting in Spider-Man Brand New Day. This also does mean that it would have a ripple effect on No Way Home. There would be a completely different No Way Home movie. One of the biggest questions is, concerns is the fact that the third and final sequel to the Home trilogy is that it might change. Without Stark technology, Peter may never attend MIT under the circumstances, and all the events leading to Doctor Strange's spell might never occur. Even if Peter eventually met Strange, his journey would be very different, and multiversal crossovers between Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man would probably never have happened anyway as well. So in saying all this, would Peter Parker or Spider-Man be better off? Ironically, Peter may become more the comic accurate Spider-Man without Tony Stark, and he probably would learn responsibility through personal struggle rather than mentorship. And depending on more on his own abilities and build his reputation independently, I think is probably what would work better for this version of Spider-Man. However, he would also lose opportunities to grow alongside the Avengers and face much greater challenges alone. So, what if Spider-Man never met Tony Stark? Well, as I said, I think the MCU itself changes surprisingly little at first, but Peter Parker's entire life follows a completely different path. Instead of becoming Iron Man's successor, he becomes a true neighborhood hero whose greatest victories and failures are entirely his own. None of them are shared across members of a team. Some fans argue this version better reflects Spider-Man's comic book roots, while others believe Tony Stark's mentorship created one of the MCU's strongest character arcs. Now that I cannot deny. He probably wouldn't have become an Avenger, he'd never wear nanotech armor, travel to space, or inherit Stark technology, but he may become something even closer to the Spider-Man fans have wanted and loved for decades. He probably would have become just another version of the Spider-Man that we got for Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. Yes, I said it, I don't care. I think he would become a hero who succeeds not because of the people around him, but because of people he chooses to be around with. Sometimes, the greatest heroes aren't made by mentors, they're made by responsibility. Just like Spider-Man. But without further ado, folks, that is the end of today's video. Hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe and comment what you would like to see on this channel, and let me know what you think about this theory. But I hope you have an amazing day as always, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye. Yeah.